we go ahead and get started?
Yes.
Okay,
I think they're ready.
cool. So thank you all again for joining us for the education panel. As part of the initiative by the People and One Democracy. I'm Darin. I'm a board member of One Democracy. And so we're very excited because as we've said in the earlier speeches, this is about finding consensus to contentious solutions so we can thrive together as a community. And so the panel that we're going to be discussing is education. We do have this being live streamed and recorded on Zoom, and there will be people that have a live Q&A at the end. So the format of this panel is I'm going to be asking questions to our wonderful panelists. I'm going to roughly give around 10 minutes for each question. I do have follow-up questions if the time allows for it. And then we will have a 15-minute live Q&A if you would like to ask the panelists anything, where you can ask that at that time, both on the live stream that's being curated by our main man Danny over here. So thank you very much for doing that. Without further ado, and we'll give a segment for y'all to introduce yourselves, but I thought I would just do a quick thing for time. So we have Sarah Reale? Reale. Yep. Okay, that's real cool. So thank you. Okay, so she's a state school board candidate, and a Salt Lake native, and she has a passion for advocacy, a proven record of experience in education, and action-oriented, student-first focus to help students reach their academic and career goals. She has a graduate in education policy and believes education is the most important institution our government manages. So thank you very much, Sarah, for being here. And then next we have Kathleen Riebe, or Senator Riebe, who is the senator for District 8. And Kathleen will be participating in her 5th legislative session soon. She serves on the following committees, which is Public Education and Appropriations, Higher Education, Transportation, and Law Enforcement interim. Prior to working in the Senate, Kathleen was a member of the Utah State School Board. She has been teaching for 21 years in the Granite School District. Next, we have Alena Ericksen, who is an educator and a candidate for House District. Yes.
No, I was in the primary loss.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
She was a candidate. So she's been married for 26 years. She's a mother of 6 and a grandmother of 2, with degrees in marriage and family, various certifications, and as a therapist. Alena greatest interest in the reducing human suffering and helping individuals achieve self-actualization. Her interests have also driven her to be involved politically in various ways, including running for House of Representatives. And then last, we have Jessica Fiveash with All Things Utah. She's been married for 21 years and has 3 teenage children. Now a politically active conservative, Jessica is a former educator, Utah Education Association local and state leader, ran for city council, and was chair of the Utah Democratic Party's education caucus for several years. She changed her viewpoints during the lockdown and hopes to bring common sense and discussion to both sides of the aisle. Okay, so we have that. So without further ado, I'm going to kick it over to our panelists. I gave a brief introduction, but I think it's very important to assess where our passions are, what our history is. So please give a brief description of yourself and what you or your group does to improve education for our youth. We'll start with you, Jessica.
I'm Jessica Fiveash. I was a former teacher at a Title I school. I wanted to help the underserved community, and I know the issues that stem from those types of neighborhoods. So I wanted to be, a caring adult in their lives. And so I saw a lot there that I wanted to change, jumped into a lot of community work through that. But in the meantime, I did change some views through some experiences. But what my groups have done, I founded Academic Integrity Movement, as well as All Things Utah. And what we do is we go to state school board meetings, legislative council, committee meetings, and we speak on behalf of parents and students, and just see if we can find common ground between the two sides, because there's so much contention. And I think all of our goals are pretty much the same. But I've worked with both sides. My goal is to see if we can find common ground and really actually help the students, which is why we're here.
Thank you, Jessica.
I just want to thank Darin and others for the opportunity to be here. I think these conversations are really important. I'm not a professional educator, but I am a mother of 6 and I homeschooled for about 17 years. That was never my choice. I mean, it eventually became my choice, but it wasn't my initial plan. When I started noticing that my children were not doing well, I took matters into my own hand and I experienced a different world and different forms of educating. I've also done private school. I've worked in a private school, American Heritage Academy in Las Vegas, and I have had my children in charter schools. And so with that, I do value education. I would agree. It's one of the most important things we can do for our children, but I offer a different perspective and a different voice. And so with that, I also see many children as a therapist and families and individuals, and I care deeply about that. I want to respect the field of mental health. I have great concerns that education has become mental health institutions, and I would be happy to explain why. So with that, that is why I'm here, and I'm here to just offer whatever I can and round the conversation out.
Hi, I'm Senator Riebe. I have been teaching for 22 years here in Utah. Before that, I lived in New York and I traveled around the country doing outdoor education. I'm an unusual teacher because as a student, I wasn't a good student. I was always like a little bit of a troublemaker, but that also gives me another perspective on how schools work. And part of the reason why I started to get more involved in the way that my schools are working is because I noticed that there's a lot of great things going on, but sometimes they get crowded out by some of the stuff that is not really impactful for our families and really best for our communities. So my goal is to emphasize the best things that we're doing in our schools. Right now I'm in 2 schools that are dealing with maybe closing their schools. And it's hard. It's hard on those communities. It's hard on those families. And so I think it's a partnership. Our schools are partners with our families and our partners with our communities. And when we partner together, good schools equal good families, equal good outcomes. So I'm looking to extend that partnership, listen to my constituents, and really emphasize the great things that are happening in my schools.
Thank you, Sarah. Sarah?
Yeah, my name is Sarah Reale, and I have worked in higher education for almost 20 years. I started at Utah State University, and then I've been at Salt Lake Community College for the last 12 years. I'm an educator, so I teach political science, intro to American politics and government. It's a general education course. I've taught that for about 10 years. And then I'm also an administrator. So I am a director at the college, and I work on communicating different types of student success programs, as well as our enrollment and retention, all of the academic programs. I manage all of the communications that are digital at the college. So it's a lot of different things. During the pandemic, it was no fun because everything went digital. I'm also running for state school board because I'm an advocate for education. My mom's a teacher. My mom's a teacher in Granite. My sister's a teacher in Cache County. I care deeply about education, and I'm running to be an advocate for teachers so that we can support our students in the best way possible. I'm also on the Salt Lake City Library Board, the Salt Lake County Mountainous Planning Commission, as well as the Salt Lake County Open Spaces Board. So I have 2 passions: public lands and education, and I divide my advocacy work in both of those ways.
Thank you very much. So yeah, we have the lovely panelists with us today. So thank you very much for coming. So let's start off with the very simple question. What is the purpose of education for you? Let's start with you down there, Sarah.
Yeah, to me, education is the cornerstone to an equitable society. I really believe that education is one of the most important institutions our government manages. We all have teachers that have changed our lives, or classes we've taken that have made us realize certain passions, and books we've read that have opened our eyes to new worlds. So education is so important. I think that it is a key to addressing a lot of systemic issues we have in our world. Education takes a community. So for me, it's not just the learning and the standards and the testing. There's so much to education, from social learning to emotional, to understanding and having empathy for others, building community. And education is also building a community around students. So everything from their transportation to school, to a hot meal, to extracurricular activities, it takes a community to educate someone. But to me, it's one of the most important institutions our government manages, because if we have an educated society, we have an equitable society, and that creates inclusivity and understanding. And we all need that in this world, especially right now.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Senator?
Thanks. I would agree with most of what, well, I agree with everything Sarah said. But, and I won't repeat it, most of that, but I also think that when we look at education, we think of education as in a silo, and it's not in a silo. Education is our largest employer in every county, the largest employer in every county. So if you think about all the money that's going into our communities from our education system, that's a really big deal. I mean, it provides, when we had the pandemic, we had closed all the schools and we opened them again. And Utah came out of the pandemic a little bit better than most states because our schools were open. We provided a place for kids to go if they felt comfortable. Their parents had that support network if they had to go to their jobs. And so that was a really eye-opening experience. You know, when they closed all the banks and they closed all the courts, they're like, we don't know what to do. I'm like, hey, go out, let's go talk to the teachers. They're doing it already. They're online, they're meeting with their teachers, they're meeting with their parents, they're providing meals outside, they're driving around with Wi-Fi spots. I mean, we were on the floor, we were out the door, we were meeting those kids, we were trying to find out their needs as fast as possible. So that was pretty exciting. You know, when education started as being a program that every kid was going to get a free education, it was a couple of thought processes. It could be that we were going to mold everybody into an American values situation, or we were going to create workers for the workforce. And we have to decide exactly where that's going to be. We're always in flux. We're always trying to figure that out. We're always trying to respond to the people in our communities. So what is education? All depends on what day of the week we're talking about, what's happening in that community. I mean, it changes all the time. And that's the beauty of our education system. We are resilient. We could be more flexible than we are right now, but that takes money and that takes resources for us to be as resilient as possible. But when something happens, we rely on our education system to control the waters, to provide the stability in our communities. And I think that's what education is all about. And I really admire that about that institution in our country, because not every country has that. And that's pretty incredible. Oh, sorry. I'm just looking at people out in the audience. Sorry.
No, you're in the flow. I get it. Alena, what's the purpose of education?
Well, it's interesting that we asked this question, but I think it's an essential question. With every goal we have, we need to have a clear outline, understanding of where we're going with it. If we turn to Utah Code 53E201, it says to produce virtuous and informed citizenry. I have a problem with this. It's too ambiguous. What does that even mean? Originally, public education was pushed by the progressives between 1880 and 1920. And it was during the Industrial Revolution. It was to train individuals how to have jobs, how to read, how to have job skills, and to contribute into society. As many people were leaving farms and going to the city, this became essential. I would suggest that we have to understand what the purpose of education is and what we need to do better. And I think we can see that through the proficiency rates. On average, in the state of Utah, we have a proficiency rate of about just over 40%. The Granite School District, mathematics is 11%. Yet, the overall state graduation is 88% and Granite has 93%. Can somebody explain those discrepancies? That is interesting to me. In my experience as a home educator, I believe that we do not need a lot of money to educate. I have done it cheaply. And I believe that when we take upon some of the greatest minds that are available to all of us throughout history, we come and we introduce those children to the greatness, face to face with greatness. The greatest works were inspirations of former works. And that is, to me, something that I valued. And also, as I homeschooled my children, I recognized that education is a broad spectrum of how we help the child develop into an individual. And so it goes way beyond even books. And that's my thought on that.
Thank you very much. Yes, the purpose of education.
I like to echo a lot of what they've already said, but my biggest thing about the role of education is to raise the next generation of contributing adults to society, teach them skills that they need to contribute to our civics or our community. But right now, what I see is skills aren't being taught. I've got two daughters in charter schools and at university. They're both engineering and medical fields. And my university child, she's complaining that she keeps having to take English over and over and over. And so I just don't understand how the role of educating, doing 5 or 6 years of the same English courses over and over when they're not teaching these needed skills. People don't know how to grow their own food, like what Darin does, teach people how to feed themselves, to fix things at their home. Education is more than just learning to read. Once you learn to read, you can start learning to read nonfiction and teach yourself skills. So I think that there's much more than what we are doing. And I don't think it takes more money because I've, as a teacher and as a union leader formerly, I watched us ask for more money for the per student, budget. And it did not increase learning. It increased admin income. It increased Chromebooks in the classroom, which then goes into pornography ads popping up on the screens in class, which I had to take care of and handle. So I don't believe that there's throwing money at the problem. I think it's the content, and we can find that inexpensively. But a purpose of education is to try and get our next generation to be of good character, have values, and contribute to society.
Thank you very much, Jessica. Okay, I think a good follow-up would be, we have this purpose of education and what we think that it is, but then how is that implemented? So my next question to the panel, and I'm just going to open it up to the panel. Whoever would like to speak first, just please raise your hand. Who should be at the table deciding what gets taught and how? Senator?
I think everyone should be at the table. Like I said, education is our largest employer in every county, so that has a large impact on all of our families. But when we talk about a partnership, we also talk about some of the people that can't be at the table. And if you can't be at the table, you need to have an advocate for you at the table. So that's hard too. And then we also have people who come from other countries who don't speak the same language, or they might have some kind of learning disability where they feel uncomfortable coming back to our schools, or there might be something in their past that makes them feel uncomfortable about being at our schools. This is a big deal. Our kids are relying on this connection to their community to be successful. And I take that seriously. When I worked out in Magna, school was really traumatic for a lot of those kids I worked with. Their parents, they're like, we don't want to come back, and like where Miss Riebe might be mad at me. I'm like, I'm not your teacher, I'm your kid's teacher. Like, but we didn't send them to school on Thursday. I'm like, that's okay. Like, so having this relationship with the second generation of students, trying to fix that feeling sometimes is a really big deal. So I think there's some work that we need to repair. I think there's some misunderstandings that we need to clear up about what's happening in our schools. With the advent of technology, we've gotten better at interpreting things into many different languages, having ability to do stuff like this so kids can stay at home with their parents. And we have to understand other people's cultures, because sometimes when we reach out to families, we're actually insulting them and their culture. So I think everyone should be involved. And when we talk about school and education, we need to be educating our kids at home. We all homeschool our kids. I mean, I'm always teaching my kids all the time. So I think that we need to recognize that it's not who should be at the table at education for school. It's education's happening all around us, and how can we do the best that we can possibly do.
Yeah, absolutely.
So as far as who should be at the table, Utah Code 53G, it says parents are the primary person or people responsible for the education of their student in Utah, and the state is the second, and their role is supporting the parents. So what I see is we go to the state school board, they implement things coming down from the legislature. But what you find out is there's a group called the Access Committee, and they are advising the state school board. And that Access Committee is made up of only minorities and LGBTQ representatives. There are no just conservative white families in that mix. So if parents are supposed to be in Utah, the primary person in charge of this education system. Why is there a special interest group? Because most of the people on this access group have special interests like the union or other diverse groups behind them, but there's no parent advisory group leading the way. And in Utah, that's against our code. So I think parents should be number one, and state school board should listen to them as well as special interest groups if the students are the reason we're doing this.
Sarah?
Yeah, I just want to add, I believe that everyone should be at the table, and I believe deeply in parent involvement. But the reality is that being engaged in your child's education as a parent is a privilege. It's a privilege because that means that you have enough resources to be at home at night when they're needing help with their homework, that you're there to pick them up from half-day kindergarten, that you're able to really truly support them in the ways that they need. And that means that you're not working 3 jobs, or you're not dealing with immigration issues. And the reality is that, especially Salt Lake County, our population is changing. And as much as I want more parent engagement, which I absolutely do, it's really not realistic for all parents to be that engaged with their students, even though they want to. And a lot of voices at the table is so important, and there should be representation in that way. And for me, there's thinking through the voices that have not been able to be heard for a very long time and making sure that they have voices at the table, but also understanding that not every parent has the ability to be there for their student, even though they really, truly want to.
Thank you very much. You guys weigh in?
Yes, yeah, I will add my thoughts. So I agree that everybody should be at the table with some exclusions. I don't believe the federal government has a place in our state. I don't believe the Department of Education should be in existence. I believe we should keep things in state, locally, so that we can control what's happening within our communities for the best outcomes. I would say, again, what should be taught, I think it goes back to the role of education. We send our children to school to learn the skills necessary to obtain a career, job training. And I think anything outside of that scope needs to be considered and possibly excluded. I would add to that the mental health. I think it's wonderful that people are compassionate. I think it's important that we recognize that children are struggling. I deal with it every day. I see it. I see it in my office. I see the faces of families and children. It is real. But let's understand, I am licensed to be able to handle that kind of information. A teacher is not. If a teacher is trained to see or notice a difference in that child and some struggles, their job is to inform. Formally, it's always been, and it's worked well this way, their job is to inform the school counselor, of which then the parents get involved with the student. And so mental health belongs in mental health. I think we need to stay in our lanes. And finally, I will say with pornography, that is a big topic that I think we do need to discuss in schools. I don't think any one of us would hand a child alcohol or any addictive substance, and yet if we have pornography in our schools, in the libraries, that is accessible and that is addictive. The problem with addictive pornography is it will rewire the brain. And we know that it actually damages children. And so that access to that is harmful, and we need to make sure to safeguard our children.
Yes.
I'd like to clarify that that access committee is part of like probably 20 committees that we have at the state school board. The reason why the access committee was created is because if you look at the state school board, it's pretty homogeneous. And if you look at our committees, they're pretty homogeneous. And it's really hard for a person that doesn't look like you to step into one of those committees. It's intimidating. So we tried to create a safe place and add on to those committees so that we had one more committee that actually could reach out and find out the differences between different populations and different backgrounds and cultures. I've been teaching for 22 years now, pornography. I have only one time in 22 years had a kid look at pornography at school. We have tools, we have filters, we have things in place, and this is not as prevalent as people are making it out to be. Our school systems have created a law. I voted for it, Senate Bill HB 374. We've created committees. We have review processes, and I think that we are addressing this at a very robust conversation to the detriment of other things that are going on in our schools. This is not happening in our schools. We have programs in place. We have filters on our computers. We have parents that are watching their computers online while they're sitting at their tables. I don't believe that this is an issue. We have a list of 264 books that's come from different organizations that are talking about the Bright Line. And I think that this is not something that we should be focusing on as much as we are.
Can I offer?
I'm gonna do a follow-up.
Okay.
Okay. So what I'm hearing is there are parent concerns about certain issues, whether it be pornography or other issues that we'll get into later on this panel. But we see all across the US right now, there are a lot of contentious school board meetings with very upset parents. And it may be leading towards, misunderstandings or miscommunications with these committees. So how do we ensure that the information parents are receiving is correct information? And how do we get parents more involved with these meetings so that they feel heard and not shut out of the process and are a part of the education curriculum?
Well, my question is, I've extensively studied and we have the grammar requests on the transcripts of the Access meetings. There's no other active group that is advising the state school board more than Access. So that's my issue. I've called on the state school board to create a comprehensive parent advisory group. That would be the best case scenario of all demographics. I'm not trying to put out anybody, but to have a special interest led group tell the state school board through the governor's office, through the superintendent, Sydney Dixon, to tell basically the tail wagging the dog. I don't see any other, if you can look at the advisory groups behind the state school board on their website, there's no other active group. This is the group. And then what was the other part of the pornography? As a teacher, every Chromebook day, I would have 3 to 5 students bring their computers up and say, Miss Fiveash, this ad's popping up, and we have to go take it to the IT person on a regular basis. So this is happening in our classroom, whether they want to say that it is or not. This is the problem.
Yes, sir.
Well, to answer your question, I think that and one of the reasons why I ran for state school board is I was absolutely sick and tired of the politics taking over our discussions at the school board level. We're screaming about 0.0021% of books that may have something that has sensitive material in it. We're screaming about something that is not taught in Utah schools, and none of these meetings that are held are talking about the real issues facing our students, like providing more resources for mental health. We need tons more. I've talked to superintendents. I said, what is the one thing you want? And they were like, we need at least 50 more licensed certified mental health professionals to support our students. We are seeing mental health issues starting in 3rd grade after this pandemic. So the reason that I'm so frustrated with education right now is we're talking about these things that are actually not the biggest issues facing education. The biggest issues facing education is, why are teachers leaving at a rapid rate? Why are students struggling to pass tests? Why are we not being able to integrate more personalized learning and more access? And why do we have this massive equity gap that makes me so upset that east to west in Salt Lake Valley, we have a major equity gap in Granite School District. They're getting A's on their report card on the east bench and D's on their report card on the west bench. We have a changing population. There are so many issues we need to face, but our school boards and parents are spending a lot of time screaming about things that are actually not real issues. I would love to talk to the students and say, what are the things that are really troubling you? What is hard? Why is school difficult to you? What would you like to see in your education? And hear from them, because I'm almost certain that the majority of the things that parents are talking about on online forums and the media is filling our brains with are not the issues that our students are actually facing.
So I have thoughts on how do we get parents more involved. I think the first thing we do is we stop calling them domestic terrorists. Secondly, we need to stop telling parents they cannot have access to the classroom. I'm not saying this is generally happening, but it has happened. There are some parents who have not been able to have access to the class. When I've talked about pornography, that is an issue because that is mental health. That does affect children. And I have personally seen and held and know the names of the books in my county of what this is happening. I'm not just talking about a computer screen. I'm talking about books that were actually in and available for children. And that's what's up for discussion. I think that the most valuable thing that we can have is that we feel heard and understood. And if parents come to a meeting, you know, are they being heard? Are they being understood? Are they able to go to their teachers? I think so. I think most teachers are working very hard and want feedback from the parents. It's a very difficult thing because we have inflation that's keeping most families bound under a double income. I get it. I personally made great sacrifices raising my children. I had a family of 8 and we were surviving off of about 24,000 a year for a long time. I grew everything. I cooked everything from scratch, but you know what? It was important for my husband and I that I was home and available and had that flexibility to raise my children. So we made hard choices. And eventually the time came where I was able to get a degree and my husband was able to advance in a career. We changed things. So I understand the difficulties there. So
I have a follow-up.
Oh, do I get
Oh, sorry.
I
Yes, please, yeah.
So, one of my favorite experiences, not really my favorite, but one of the most impactful experiences I had on the state school board was one time we all voted and someone was voted down and there was an outburst afterwards and said, "You're not listening." And my response was, we listened for the last hour. We listened the hour before. We all don't agree. And that's how this works. We are vote majority. And so unfortunately, we didn't agree with that stance and we voted the opposite way. It wasn't that we didn't hear her. It wasn't that her voices wasn't listened to. It's important to have those people on our communities. It's important to have a wide range of ideas on our communities. So after that experience, they had a bill passed. They were trying to run a bill where they were going to dissolve the state school board. And across the whole entire spectrum, all the people on the state school board, even though we never agreed on anything, all of us, we all came together and said, I don't agree with him, I don't agree with her, but I respect the fact that I get to come to this room and listen to all those opinions. And I brought home your thoughts with me. I think about what you said to me. I think about what you're talking about. I think about what you're advocating for, but majority rules. We were elected to represent the people in our communities, and my community might not be the same as your community, but we are listening to each other and we're bringing our voices with us. But the majority rules, and we were elected to be a part of that community. And it's not that we're not listening. It's not that we don't care. It's that we have to move in a majority vote situation.
All right. Thank you very much for sharing. Last 15 minutes of time. So we have about 20 minutes left, and then we're gonna do the Q&A.
I just really want to apologize for being clear. I'm gonna get some like last minute changes.
It's okay. It's okay.
Thank you guys.
Can I just not use the
Yeah.
Right, it's fine, it's fine. Okay, so. Yes, yes.
I want to agree. We need mental health resources majorly. But I don't agree. What's happened is because of the mental health crisis in our schools, teachers have seemed to have to become therapists. I know I quit in 2018 and what I was trained to do is basically lead group therapy sessions when that's not what my degree was in. And so we need some sort of crisis intervention in this. We need mental health resources in schools because teachers, that's not what they're there for. And so teachers are leaving in droves, yes, because we can't do it all. We're data mining, we're tracking, we're collecting, we're testing, we're pre-testing, we're post-testing. When do we teach? We're not therapists. I mean, a lot of us have that heart to be a therapist, but that's not our job. So there is a huge mental health crisis, but I don't think adding that as a teacher's job is the answer. So I totally agree that we need resources.
In regards to that, as kind of a follow-up, I myself am an educator for a nonprofit, and a lot of time, a teacher's time goes, unpaid to, grading curriculum, planning the curriculum, and I hear that there's a need for more engagement with parents to maybe go into the classroom, be involved with that. So would you support a pay raise, a pay increase for teachers to invest more time if they're going to take on another responsibility of interacting with parents and being more accountable to parents and things like that? Is there an interest for or a necessity for a pay increase, a salary increase for teachers.
I'd rather them hire more counselors, pay us what we're worth, and let us do our job. So the data that we have to collect that goes to the higher ups, we should just be paid for our worth, and that does include a pay raise. But if the money is going to go anywhere, we're not counselors. It needs to go to extra counselors. That's my thoughts on that.
Thank you.
I don't have a problem with that either. I do think the superintendents and so forth are making way too much. That's not balanced there. So
Do you have any-
As a state school board and a legislature, we don't have ability to completely dictate how much teachers get paid. We have a $4,200 stipend that we give from the state legislature. I'm opening a bill file to increase that, but that's just part of your salary. I think that as a person in the classroom all the time, I think that's something that would be really impactful for our students in smaller class sizes. I think this is what parents really want. I think this is what teachers really want. And I understand that teachers aren't social workers or psychologists, but I'm a mom and I'm not a psychologist or a social worker. But when I'm dealing with 2 kids or 3 kids or 4 kids or 10 kids, they can feel heard, they can feel validated, they can feel loved, they can feel that when they have a smaller class size. So I do advocate for more mental health, but I also think that it's not always just about the pay, it's about the relationships, and our relationships are falling apart in some places in our schools, and that needs to be really paramount in our schools. We need to have better relationships with the parents, with the administrators, with the students. Our working environments as a classroom teacher are your students' learning environments, and that's really important to me.
Yeah, when I think about education and funding education, I go back to what I said in the beginning, which is that I think that education is like the cornerstone to an equitable society. I've had students that were former drug addicts. I've had students that were incarcerated. I've had students, and I've watched them. I had an incarcerated student that restarted at Sully Community College, and then she became the graduate of excellence. It was an incredible story, and I was so inspired by her. And I know that a huge piece of that was her getting that opportunity to have an education. And so to me, I think that so many of our systemic issues, from homelessness to addiction to all of our, type of polarized society that we're dealing with, all the issues, and all put band-aids on it, right? Like, I don't expect Mayor Mendenhall to help our problem with or support our unsheltered population. We need to go back to the beginning of where did this person, what got them there? Why are they that way? And I think that or why are they in that position? Because I think if we go back to education and providing a really solid community and education around every single child and every single student, we're going to be able to change those systemic issues. So to me, I want all the funding in education, and I want it for more substitute teachers, more para-educators, more teacher pay. If we want to be competitive, if we look at this like a market and it's economics, if we want to get people to teach, we need to pay them more, because that's a more job that they would be more inspired to do, because they know that they're going to have all those benefits. So from an economic perspective and from society's perspective of helping fix a lot of our systemic issues, we need to fund education. We need an educated society to create it more equitable and have more opportunities for people.
Okay, thank you very much, Sarah.
Yeah.
So we've kind of gone over funding, and we have an elephant in the room that we haven't really talked about yet. Because we've talked about things that are or may not be happening in the classrooms. And one of those things, whether it's pornography or specifically when we think about all of the things happening across our country and the angry school board meetings that you see on YouTube, it's the discussion of, should teachers be leading the discussion on gender and sexuality in the classroom? Is that happening? If so, why? And should we change it? Is there a role for that in the classroom? Anybody who'd like to speak to that?
yeah, I will. So when we talk about gender, I think what's very difficult about gender is there is so much more complexity to who we are than our sexuality. If all we can find is to label our sexuality and say this is who we are, then that almost puts us back to animals. And I hate to say that, but we are complex human beings, and we embrace many achievements in life. And so I think it's really interesting that why would we This is with respect to all people, because I have absolutely no discrimination to anybody, and I respect anybody's personal path and what they choose. But when it comes to children and talking about sexuality, I don't believe that belongs in the classroom. I think that's a parent conversation. I think if we can't even define what a woman is, I'm not sure how we can even have that discussion in class. I would say that, you know, I just think that we need to focus more on teaching children to love and value themselves, regardless of their biology, because they can't change their DNA. We have boys who are feminine. We have girls who are masculine, and there's nothing wrong with that. You're not just a boy and you're not just a girl. You have complexities, and that's okay. Believe it or not, I know how to work hard, and I came from a farm. 3 years before, I lived on a farm in Indiana for 3 years. I was milking cows and teaching my children to work. And I came here, and you would never think that. But we can be a complex individual, and we need to teach children that their value does not, and it should never be defined in sexuality.
Thank you very much. Would anybody else like to talk on this subject?
Oh, one more thing I will add is I do think this is
20 seconds.
okay. This is to me, this is a conversation for mental health.
So as a teacher, I can tell you that there's a lot of things I don't want to talk about in my class, but sometimes kids come in and they start talking about it. And that's the hard part. When we talk about things that we don't want to talk about in class, we're not the ones bringing them up. We're like, that's not happening as much as people are pretending it is. I spoke to one of my colleagues on the Hill, and he's like, well, why are you talking about this? I said, you know, I'll come into class and I have the greatest math lesson. I'm going to use Skittles, and we're going to talk about fractions. I'm going to make a pie graph, and we're going to do a bar graph. I'm going to have a great time. And then 2 kids got on a fight in the hallway, and it's gone. That whole math lesson's gone. Those feelings are hurt. There's anger in the classroom. Everybody gets involved. Everybody's picking sides. Bad things were said to each other. These conversations have to happen. And it's hard. I don't want to have that conversation. I wanted to do a math lesson. So I agree that gender shouldn't be talked about in the classroom. But, you know, unfortunately, sometimes we have to, because this is what these kids are bringing with them. And we're trying to create safe guardrails around that conversation to make sure that the parent is the leading person in that conversation. But when you're not there as a parent, you hope that you send your kids to someone who loves them and cares about them and will take the time to make sure that your kid feels validated and safe. And I think that's the hard part for us. We don't want to take your place, but when everything happens in school, we are there. And you want someone who cares about your kid to answer those questions and try to do it in a safe way without stepping on anybody's lane, but making sure that kid feels safe and validated before they move on to the next path.
So I totally agree with Senator Riebe. When you're a teacher, think wrenches are thrown into the mix way too often. You've got your plan and then it all goes to heck. But I know there was a show, 13 Reasons Why, when I was teaching 6th grade, and all the kids tried to talk about it and they were watching it, and I was like sick to my stomach. And they wanted to bring it into the classroom to talk about it. And I had to figure out a way. And if you've seen that show, it is the worst thing a 12-year-old should ever watch. And so while it's kind of like, let's think about that in terms of gender and sexuality. If that were to be brought up, not by me, but my students, you have to find a way to kind of shut it down and kind of say, these are things you might want to take home and talk to your family about. You don't just continue the discussion. You make them feel loved and understood. They might need a minute in the hall if they're really upset, but you don't just lead the discussion, because kids' hormones are raging. They want to know this and that. Maybe they're not allowed to talk about something at home. That could be an issue with the counselor. But to lead discussions, again, we're not group therapists. I felt like that was my job was turning in. That goes into large classroom sizes, like we were saying. My last teacher, or the last time I was teaching, I had 31 kids. We didn't even fit all of our desks in a room. I had 4 kids along my table next to me, and it was hell. Like, I didn't want to be there. It was the worst year of my life, because 9 students in 6th grade could do the work out of 31 kids. So small size classrooms, and we don't lead those discussions. We kind of wrap it up ask them to talk to an adult at home, or even make contact at home and let them know what was going on. But that's not our role, and we need to define our roles.
Oh, please finish that up. Thank you. And I always go back to two things. One is students learn best in environments where they feel comfortable and safe. And so for me, I think creating that safe environment sometimes it means that they're in a space where they can be curious, where they can make mistakes, where they can make friendships and bond and create a community and be feeling like they are open and okay to say what they want or speak out to their teacher and say, I'm feeling this way, or I'm dealing with this issue, right? And Utah had some of the strongest parental laws in the nation, and we followed them. And really, a lot of that comes down to creating those safe spaces, but also trusting our teachers. We need to trust our teachers that they are doing the best they can, that they are looking out for their students, that they're sending them to their counselor, reaching out to the parents if there's an issue, and looking for ways that they can still support their students and create safe spaces for them so that they can learn. Because their goal, all of these teachers who work so hard and are paid so little, their goal is to support their students and help them learn. And so for me, I think when we trust teachers and when we look at this sexuality conversation, I obviously think of as someone that's part of the LGBTQ community, is that one, we have the highest teen suicide rate in the nation as in the state. And we also have a lot of students who are dealing with a lot of emotional complexities. And so with that on the table, we need to be cognizant of that, but we also need to trust that we have great parental laws and teachers who really are looking out for the best for their students. So we need to trust our students, or trust our teachers, and we need to know that a lot of these issues when it comes to sexuality are already being handled through parents and teachers and the districts and the administration. They're working on it. They usually work out those issues and make sure that the parents are informed, that the student is okay, and they're doing that. So we need to trust those schools and those systems that are already set up, because they're already doing a great job, instead of making it become an issue that actually is already being handled through teachers and parents and the administrators.
Can I just clarify one point? Absolutely. So we talked about a lot of things right now, and we honor the parents. We think that they should be the person that is the person who guides their child the most. Yet we just discussed parents who are letting their kids watch 13 Reasons Why, parents who are letting their kids watch R-rated, X-rated movies, Xbox, that's Call of Duty. I don't get to choose who comes into my classroom. I don't get to say to those parents, you're not allowed to let your kid watch that. You're not allowed to keep your kid up till midnight. You're not allowed to feed your kids sugar all the time. I'm not allowed to do that because you're the parent. That was your choice. But when you come to my school, I have to honor that your parents made those decisions, but you have to come to my school and maybe leave those things at home. So that's a really fine, hard line to walk. So that's the elephant in the room, really.
Thank you very much. So just in the interest of time, because I know Senator Riebe has another engagement. I was wondering, because we were getting to the point where we maybe talk about critical race theory, if that's happening, and do closing statements, or we could open it up to questions if you all are comfortable
Let's
with
do
that.
questions.
Yeah. Does anybody have any questions they would like to ask?
Thanks. So I just talked to a lovely Asian the other day. She's a fifth grade teacher, and she, for the first time in 20 years, had to vet boys for her mentor. So how are you guys helping the education teacher?
That's a great question.
Well, I can start if you'd like.
Yeah.
We actually, as our union, we've actually, in our associations, we've actually fought with our, not fought, but we worked hand in hand with our superintendencies to make sure that we are dealing with that. We've created work groups after hours, which is a little stressful after hours, but we are trying to honor that that's happening. We are addressing it, but when a teacher is stretched thin and we're like, hey, come to this meeting after school to talk about how stressed you are about meetings, it makes it really hard. We are, a teacher has, in most districts, has some time off. And, when you need to take some time off, we're trying to figure out ways to make sure that's happening. Unfortunately, a lot of teachers don't feel like their subs are going to be good, so they don't use their subs, and that happens often. I think a lot of coaches are coming in. I know on last Friday, I told a teacher, I said, you need to go home. I will take your class right now and go talk to the principal. And if she's okay with that, you can go home. So I think as a team, we're all starting to recognize it, but I have never in my 22 years seen more teachers leaving the classroom for mental health. So many. I mean, I know 5 personally, and I think I knew 2 20 years prior to this, the whole 20 years. So I'm aware of it. I'm cognizant of it. I'm trying to voice that as much as I can. So I'm trying. Thanks.
Yeah, so last year during the legislative session, when there were all these bills about more transparency, asking teachers to add things to their entire workload, my sister, who has been teaching for 12 years in Cache County, who in 4th grade didn't ask for rollerblades or skis for Christmas. She asked for an overhead projector for Christmas so she could make a school in my parents' basement where she would make the kids after school go back to school in the basement. She loves teaching. It's her passion. And she called me and she said, I don't know if I can do this anymore. And I said, well, too bad. You have to keep going because we need you. And it made me realize that someone who loved and dedicated to that profession so deeply is feeling that way. I cannot imagine to some that aren't. And so for me, what I'm doing to work on teachers' mental health is to advocate for them, trust them, and stop placing undue burdens on them, and to support and do whatever I can to stop that legislation that's trying to ask for more transparency. And on what I've been saying over and over again, stop these conversations that are not helping our students whatsoever and causing more trauma in the classroom. For example, my sister, who is Young Women's President, she's LDS, but she got asked to take down her LGBT ally stuff from her classroom in the last week. And she's like, this is so hard for me because I'm trying to support my students and I've already saved so many lives by having that little rainbow flag up. That those are the things that are hurting our teachers, is when we're placing all this undue burden on them, when we're not trusting them and respecting them as the professionals that they are, and we're creating boogeyman legislation that does nothing but take taxpayers' dollars into resources into things that we shouldn't be focused on when there's so many other things we should be focused on.
I would say from a mental health perspective, you know, it's one thing we are taught in school, how to manage our own mental health. It's not easy to go to work and hear about the abuse and hear about the difficulties that people deal with every day for hours every day. And yet that's my job. And we have to understand that our mental health is our responsibility, and to find those resources, we need to manage that. We need to find ways to reduce our stress and to give ourselves self-care. That really is the answer. And it's also very important about setting boundaries, what you're willing to do, what you can't do. And when you know that and you know yourself, then you can advocate for yourself. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with people advocating and schools being supportive of teachers. I think that's necessary. It's essential. But ultimately, it becomes the responsibility of the individual.
Terry?
So I have China
Yes.
I have a substitute producer person. There were 200 students. Understand that 4% of Americans, the 6th grade level, 44% of Utah. So in this city, these 4 years, this number I'm seeing a regular chart with the teacher the information system. That the structure of the database is much more clear than it should be. And in the public schools, we describe it as chaos. Any other reasons, no question. So that we're lacking what kids really need to do as far as abilities, methods, etc. So we need, when we look at countries like China, yes, it's great. In fact, the rigor in the schools is rather extraordinary. And kids are learning. So I have free education data, school talk, about to the home, like schools, or the schools. So I taught master's teaching in all my schools in Detroit. When we were allowed as teachers to focus on academics, school kids kind of playing around, even home school and stuff. So I'm still putting my head together around what should happen, but it's across the country. It's not just so if we don't start focusing on that, then China will. That's what
Sorry, I love you, but China is not winning. China doesn't educate all their kids. They pick the kids that go to school, and that's why they're more successful. We talked about our testing, and we said that our kids aren't succeeding at a very high rate. That's because they can't read the test. The test is in English. That's because they haven't used the test. They haven't used the tool. They're not allowed to test only for certain parts. It's a hard test. And I think those questions are hard. And who decides what a third grade level is? We decide what a third grade level is. We've decided across the nation, and we're like, oh, our kids are behind. Our kids are where our kids are at. They've just been through a pandemic. It's been traumatic. We can get them to where they need to be. But, I think that it's really unfortunate that we look at our kids and we say, oh, they're not doing as well as China. Well, China doesn't educate all their kids. They pick the ones they want to educate. And that's a big deal to me. Every kid gets to come to our schools and every kid is welcome. So I think America is winning with that. I do agree that we need to, academics, yeah, let's focus on academics again. When I taught out in Magna, my kids were behind. I said, you're going to leave my class and you're either going to be a good reader or good at math, but you have to do one or the other, and you have to read at a 6th grade level because it's 6th grade, and everything you do outside of here is going to be written at a 6th grade level. But we also need to start honoring everybody's differences. We don't need everybody to be a doctor. We need people to pick up the trash. We need people to be police officers. We need people to swim in the ocean and study animals. I mean, we are focusing on every kid being experts at math and experts in language. We have left brain people. We have right brain people. My daughter is struggling in math right now. And I'm like, oh my gosh, why do we need to do this? She is a wonderful writer. Why does she have to feel bad about herself about being not a great math person? So, I mean, I think that there's lots of room for improvement, but I think America is winning. I know that we're compared to people and we're saying we're not, but I think we're doing some good things.
I'm gonna kick it to Danny.
Oh.
I'm gonna kick it to Danny real quick.
So, real quick, to kind of spur off, I agree, not everybody has to speak in math, but we're as a nation ranked 38.
Yeah.
On average, we spend, if you include local and state tax and federal tax plus donations, we spend about $40,000 a year per student, which is about 3 times higher than the top tier ranked nation in the world. When are we going to actually start having some visibility and accountability to what our schools are actually spending? Because they're not going to the teachers and they're not going to resources.
Well, may I suggest something? I don't think it's healthy to call people, I'm not a math person. I think all of us are different and we're individuals, and there are differences in the gender that we can understand in presenting them into the class. However, the growth mindset is absolutely essential to understand. When we put the value on learning and the process of learning and the value on failure and why that's important, children will find that they can do anything they put their minds to. And that's the message that we need to send. When we start putting titles and labels and, ways of measuring, and then people aren't good at it unless they can do it, that's the wrong message. And that's what's failing our kids.
Can I say something? And I feel like in the last decade or so, I hate to say it, we dumbed down our kids. We are not expecting a certain level of success or competency because of their background or this or that. But we have interventions that can help those things. All kids can do hard things. They can do different things, but I had 6th grade kids come in at 2nd grade level reading and math, and almost always my classes students had more going into junior high honors classes than any of the other 6th grade classes, because I would let them come in before school and we do interventions. I mean, it's possible, but to label kids as underprivileged or this or that just makes them defeated before they even get started. We've dumbed them down. We're teaching, the Common Core is like more broad but shallow. We're not teaching depth anymore. I think if we go back to how things used to be, look at our parents' school books from the 50s. That stuff was hard and they didn't have this issue. I think, yes, I do believe China is winning. I do know that they pick and choose, like Senator Reebe said, they do. They don't educate every student. I understand that, but they're heads and like they're way above what we're doing with our kids. Their expectations are higher. And I think that when we don't have expectations high enough for our students, the bar is just too low and they're going to rise to the bar that we set and we're not setting the high bar.
Yeah, I was just gonna add, I just did a quick Google search. 10.53% of the GDP in China is spent on education and 3.6% of our GDP is spent on education in the United States. For me, I always look at higher education. I hate that higher education is not a public good and provided with no cost, because the improvement in someone's life when they have a higher education, especially looking into all of the trades and technical education that we have. I spent the last 20 years telling students, you don't have to get a business degree to make money. You have so many skills and so many things you're good at. Did you know there are 130 different programs at SLC Community College that you can go into? And they're like, what? I didn't know I could go into all of these different niche like GPS and all these cool programs. And so if we made that opportunity free for students, if even just community college was free, the opportunities would be endless for these students. Some of them get 18 months at Solid Community College, they start making $70,000. There are jobs out there for those students, and we need to make sure that they understand that and increase and strengthen that P20 pipeline, because that shows, and especially if it's free or affordable, at least affordable, which Solid Community College, the reason I don't get paid very much is because we keep our tuition really low. If we invest in those educational opportunities, we're going to increase the academic excellence, but we can't do it without increasing that resource and increasing the resources for our students.
If you break those numbers down, though, they spend a lot less per student because their population is a great deal higher and they don't have as high of a GDP.
Right, I did a simple,
Yeah.
I just was
I was just
looking
letting you
because I'm
know.
like, how much do we spend on education compared to
Way
China?
more than China, like about $35,000.
But GDP is rated on a scale that is,
Yeah, but our GDP is higher than China's and their population is like 6 times.
okay, I agree with that. I just did a search because I'm like, are we investing? Yeah.
Lorraine?
Yes, hi, I'm also a community educator.
Thank you.
Been on committees for and PTAs. I've been seeing, I was fortunate to see the transformation between how it's happened and how it's modeled. One thing I've noticed, and I've also talked to parents, they're like, I think that's great, and I don't know how to help my kid if home with their homework. Prior to coming forward, and I'm not here to make fun of forward, there's good, and you know, it's good size of.
Yeah.
But my concern is when parents are saying, I don't know how to help my kid after third grade. I don't have the resources to go find tutors. And teachers can't really stay after school to help my kid because they have all these other responsibilities they have to do. What do we do? And I think that's a huge piece on spending. When people are like, what's failing? Parents have the resources to help kids like these.
I think we have to analyze that and take a look at it and say, if an adult who is functioning cannot help above a third grade level, then we have a problem with our education.
Well, in that case, when we have a lot of refugees coming in, we have so many different immigrants, and
I think it's across the board. I think that it splits the family unit even more because the parents are there but can't help because they can't even comprehend what these picture drawings mean. I mean, I had to teach it the Common Core way and then figure out how to teach algebra the way I learned it. And then the kids would go, oh, like, duh. But their parents had no idea at a 6th grade level what pre-algebra was in pictures. And so I think whether we have courses or handouts to send home to parents to make them understand, but it completely disconnects the parent from helping the kid after school. I totally understand what you're saying.
I'm not playing that question. I'm not a teacher.
Right. 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 But you had that be educated. Yep. Right.
I think that's a really interesting question because every time I interact with schools, they're like, we want to engage our parents more. We want to bring them in. And all of our resources are online. I know. And I agree with you. All our books are online now. And be like, oh, I want the paper copy. I'm like, but we have the, electronic, and we've actually sent home Chromebooks. We've tried to make it more interactive. It is hard. It really is. I mean, I'm a parent and I struggle with my daughter's Canvas page. I actually have a Canvas page. I'm like, oh my gosh, what is the teacher doing? It's hard. It's really hard. And I don't know the answer to that. I really don't. I think we're trying really hard, but the rubber's not hitting the road. And I frequently have suggested, why don't we have classes at night so we can teach the parents of the kids and help them. During the pandemic, a parent called and said, I can't get my kid on the computer. And I'm like, okay. And I'm talking to the parent. I'm like, hey, you know what? Why don't you just put your son on the phone? And he's in kindergarten, like my kindergartner. I'm like, yeah. I'm like, hey, Bobby, hit the Oreo. Now hit the smiley face. Now hit the, and I had all of these names and I'm like, all right, now put your mom back on. I'm like, all right. I'm like, you got that? I'm like, yeah, we kind of have like a jargon going on, and that's hard. Like, that's hard, but we spent all day figuring it out. So I wish we had a better answer. I wish we did. We really are trying.
I only have two little simple, two small things. One is I think we need a full-time Spanish English translator at every single school in Salt Lake County, especially, and that will help a lot. I've been to a lot of school community councils with translators, and I'm like, this is so awesome because there are so many parents there that don't speak English. And we need to, again, think about the equity and the changing population that we have in Salt Lake County, especially, and really focus our resources and needs to making sure we can speak to and engage with those parents. And that includes adding translators, adding more resources in Spanish, whatever it is, to make sure that those parents can get engaged. Because a lot of time it's a total language barrier. And I understand it's not just Spanish because we have so many refugees, which I love, but it is more than that. But
So we have about 1 minute left. So first off, I just want to say thank you, panelists. Thank you, participants, to come here. If there's any final thoughts that you would like to share, we only do it's 6:15. So if you
wave.
If you have fun thoughts, you're welcome to share them. But other than that, thank you very much.
Thank you.
The only last thought I have is, can we please make school board races not partisan?
Yeah,
I would love to not be running with a political affiliation because I think that there's just work that needs to be done and we don't need to make it political, and that could be one huge step. So write your legislator and tell them they should take back their stupid bill that made state school board races partisan because it drives me crazy. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Hey, thank you.
Thank
Appreciate
you so
everybody
much
coming.
for coming.
Thank you for taking the time to come out.
Thank you very, very much.
Yes. Yeah.
It's not a problem.
Oh.
Money, that's not.
Right. I mean, I